New York, the city of endless possibilities. Literally, you can start a business, meet millionaires on a street corner, grab a coffee right after a celebrity, or maybe get whacked by the mob, or even the police for that matter. Maybe you want to live paycheck to paycheck for nothing special because of a dense population. If you think about moving, here are the top 10 reasons why you shouldn't live in New York City. 10. It's a one-city state. This is a point that can be made about a lot of states in the city union. In fact, there are a few states that don't even have places that can rightfully be called cities. The state of New York, for its part, is pretty much defined, judged, and misaligned by the comings and goings of New York City. One would think, in fact, that there is no actual state and that New York City is an independent entity free of the reins of statehood. Unfortunately, what this means is that nobody pays much attention to any of the other part of the state. Even the folks in the state's capital. No, it's not New York, folks, it's Albany. Spend more time legislating around the affairs of the state's most cosmopolitan city. And let's be honest, just how many cities in the state of New York can the average person on the streets name? 9. Organized crime still exists. Truth is stranger than fiction, and organized crime is a reality that has plagued New York and law enforcement since the early 1900s. The 5 major organized crime families call New York home and control a good deal of its commerce to this day. This includes many of the unions that employ workers in various industries like trash collections. You want to get a job? You might have to deal with the mob. You want to live in a particular area? You might have to deal with the mob. Maybe not in direct sense. These folks have a large collection of associates. Estimated well over 250,000 people in various sources, law enforcement place their membership numbers in the tens of thousands. Suffice to say, these are not people you want to run afoul of. With an annual revenue that is estimated to be over $100 million, these guys are serious, and there is a trail of dead and missing bodies of those unfortunate enough to get in their way. 8. Street gang presence. Along with organized crime, there are many gangs that are still very active in New York City. Many people are mistaken with the idea that gangs are only in one area of town. In New York City, there are very few neighborhoods that do not have some type of gang presence. Gone are the days that gang members took the time to put on colorful jackets with their names emblazoned on them. No, now it's drug dealing, drive-by shootings, and outright murder. And don't think that these are just a bunch of hoods that are confined to just one ethnicity or neighborhood. Every New York locale and ethnic group has their own brand. There's the Latino gangs such as Los Vatos Locos and Latin Kings, the Black gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, the Vietnamese gangs, the Green Dragons and Born to Kill, the Dominican gang DNP, white gangs like Hell's Angels, and the list goes on and on. Not surprisingly, because of the proliferation of gang activity, New York continues to be on the losing end of dealing with crime and protecting its law-abiding citizens. This leads us to the next item on our list of why you might not want to call New York home. 7. Soaring crime rate. I'm sure everyone hears about the crime rate in New York, and it's pretty bad. I've seen people get robbed on the train, even beat up on occasions. Like I said, people are really on edge out there, so you have to be really careful. A person living in New York is more likely to be the victim of a violent crime than anyone else living in another state. According to the most recent numbers from the federal government, violent crimes across the United States is on the decline, about 5% overall. New York, however, has experienced a 4.6% overall increase in violent crime. The numbers are really scary. Murder is up 14%, Big R is up 24.5%, robberies increased 5.4%, and aggravated assaults jumped 3.2%. Folks, that's a lot of crime. The stereotype of everyone getting mugged in New York may not be as fictionalized as some would have us believe. 6. The police forces. NYC has become one of the biggest security threats in the U.S. Due to this, you might find you are sharing the streets with armed security guards, military and police during holidays and other busy times throughout the year. There is no other state in the U.S. where you have these things happen. With the prevalent soaring crime rate, street gangs, and organized crime problems confronting the residents of New York, one would think that local law enforcement would be near and dear to the hearts of New Yorkers. Unfortunately, it seems that New Yorkers are just as likely to be a victim of police brutality as they are of crime. New York has the young West African immigrant who was shot 19 times while standing in front of his apartment by 4 plainclothes police officers. Cases of police misconduct are legendary in New York. Surprisingly, it's rare that any of these cops are ever convicted of anything, regardless of the weighty evidence against them in many instances. Consider that since 2001, there have been 287 people that have been killed by New York law enforcement officials. Whether justified and in the line of duty or not, that's a lot of dead people. It's a scary thought that a cop might shoot you before a criminal does, yet this is the dilemma that New Yorkers often face. 5. The cost of living is astronomical. The cost of living in New York is out of this world. If you're not rolling in the dough, you're probably going to have a hard time trying to make ends meet in the Empire State. The cost of living in New York is 25% higher than the national average. A New Yorker has to earn about $123,000 a year to have the same standard of living as a person residing in Houston that makes $50,000 a year. And if you don't plan on living under a bridge or in a park, you can expect inflated housing costs that are 400% above the national average. What many New Yorkers are paying in their apartment rent equates to healthy mortgage payments for the rest of the country. Currently, New York City ranks on the top 10 list for most expensive cities in the world. If you aren't making $100,000 a year, then chances are you aren't going to live very comfortably in New York. You'll just be making ends meet. 4. Too many people. Approximately 8.5 million people live in New York City. This is almost 3 times more than the population of Los Angeles and 4 times the population of Chicago. And in 2013, there were about 54 million tourists who came to New York to visit. This means all day long, 24/7, it is just full of people here. You can barely walk on the street when you're in certain parts of Manhattan. You can attribute a lot of the problems with New York to the fact that there are just too many people living here. With 19+ million souls residing within its borders, New York is the 3rd most populous state in the Union. That's a lot of people that all have needs. These folks have to work, be fed, receive medical attention, be protected, etc. The resources of the state simply are failing to accommodate the needs of the people it already has. With so many people living in such close proximity to one another, there are bound to be a host of problems. Can you imagine, for example, living in a 2-room house with 10 to 15 family members? If you can't, that's New York living for you. 3. So many tourists. There are already 19 million people living in New York. When you add the several million tourists that visit the state each year, the place is just downright crowded. Unlike many other states that actually have an industry of some kind, New York's primary industry is tourism. Looked at another way, the state is trying to get more people to visit the state and spend their money there, and spend money they do, something in the order of $30 billion. What this means is that there are always people walking around gawking at you and asking you ridiculous questions. Then, because tourism is the most lucrative industry that New York has to offer, residents tend to find that the state caters and has preferences to the needs of tourists over them. It's a fact that the police are much more likely to bash a fellow New Yorker in the head than an out-of-state tourist. 2. What is this accent? If you have ever had the privilege of speaking to someone from New York, you probably chalked the experience up to something akin to communicating with an Irish Mongolian. It takes a bit of concentration to actually discern what the folks are saying. Amazingly, in a primarily English-speaking country, our Eastern Seaboard brothers and sisters have developed a dialect that is wholly and uniquely their own. Spending any significant time in New York is similar to moving to Texas. You have to learn an entirely new language to be understood. Though it might be easier learning Spanish than New Yorkese, for lack of a better name. 1. New York Yankees fans. You either love them or hate them, and many of us fall into the hate them category. The funny thing is that a lot of people feel this way and don't even follow baseball. Yet, Yankees fans tend to come across as obnoxious and overbearing, not particularly warm and fuzzy people that you would want to be around. This can be especially irritating when you have to listen to these folks ranting in their New Yorker dialect, like nails on a chalkboard. And that's about it for now. Thank you for watching the top 10 reasons why you shouldn't live in New York City.